It began with silence. Not the kind that follows a royal speech or a public event, but the suffocating kind that sits in the air when truth finally collides with power. That morning, Buckingham Palace didn't hum with its usual rhythm of clinking teacups, echoing footsteps, and whispered protocol. Instead, there was tension, raw, unspoken tension. Something monumental had broken through the walls of secrecy that had shielded the British monarchy for centuries. But this time, it wasn't a scandal about a lover, a leaked memo, or a drunken relative. This was far worse. It was about blood, about lineage, about whether the children of a prince were ever real at all. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine waking up one morning to find out your grandchildren, the ones whose names the world had celebrated, whose faces appeared on commemorative plates, whose very existence symbolized the modern, diverse face of the monarchy, might never have existed in the first place. That was the position King Charles III found himself in when an unmarked envelope arrived at Clarence House. Inside it, a classified report that no monarch should ever have to read. It was a report that would unravel years of image building, shake the credibility of the royal family to its core, and leave Prince Harry standing at the edge of rage and ruin. And yet, for weeks, no one outside that gilded palace had any idea what was brewing behind closed doors. Now, the truth is finally coming out. And once you hear what King Charles discovered, you'll never look at the royal family the same way again. Because this isn't just a story about royal drama. It's about deception, inheritance, power, and the ultimate betrayal between father and son. The first whisper began with a single question raised by a royal aide last year. A question that seemed harmless at first. Your Majesty, has the royal register for Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana ever been officially verified by the Crown Office? It was protocol. Every royal birth has always been recorded, witnessed, and stamped under the authority of the sovereign. But when the clerk tried to retrieve the official certificates from the royal archive, something strange happened. There was nothing. The file didn't exist. No seal, no signature, no official record. Just an empty folder with their names penciled in, as if someone meant to fill it later. At first, the palace dismissed it as an administrative error, perhaps lost in the chaos of Meghan and Harry's departure to California. But errors like that don't happen in the royal household. Not under the scrutiny of MI5, the Home Office, and the Privy Council. And so the king quietly ordered an internal inquiry. No public statements. No leaks. Just a discreet cross-departmental review of royal documentation, birth records, and family lineage. But the deeper his investigators dug, the stranger it got. The hospitals listed on the supposed birth certificates had no record of any royal-associated births on those dates. The attending physician's name? Non-existent. The notary? Retired before the births even occurred. And when inquiries were made about the supposed surrogates tied to Meghan Markle's confidential contracts, well, those leads didn't go anywhere either. Some addresses were fake. Others belonged to shell corporations tied to offshore trusts. By the time the king received the initial summary report, his hands trembled. The language was cold, clinical, and damning. Verification inconclusive. No physical documentation or photographic corroboration provided. External hospital and state records indicate inconsistency. Inconsistency. That was the word that haunted Charles for days. Because this wasn't just inconsistency, it was erasure. For years, the monarchy had worked tirelessly to protect the Duke and Duchess of Sussex from relentless media attacks. When Meghan claimed she had been mistreated, Charles offered her personal support. When Harry lashed out at the press, the king defended him in private. And when rumors about the children's legitimacy first surfaced online, the palace dismissed them as vile conspiracies. But now, the king was staring at something far worse than rumor. He was staring at proof, or the absence of it. He summoned only 3 people to the first meeting: Sir Clive Markham, the keeper of royal archives; Lady Mary Pettigrew, the palace legal director; and Colonel Simon Ashcroft, a liaison to MI5. The king sat at the head of the mahogany table, glasses low on his nose, his tone quiet but cutting. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, "that we cannot confirm the births of my grandchildren?" No one spoke. Lady Pettigrew simply lowered her eyes to the table. In that moment, Charles didn't just feel anger. He felt humiliation. The entire world had celebrated those births. There were official royal announcements, press photos, public congratulations from world leaders. But what if all of it had been built on forged documents and staged photographs? The monarchy could survive scandals. It had survived divorces, affairs, even abdications. But to survive the revelation that two royal heirs might not even exist, that would be an extinction-level event. For days, Charles struggled to process it. He spent hours pacing the halls of Clarence's house, torn between disbelief and dread. He thought about his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and how she had sacrificed her own emotions to preserve the crown's integrity. What would she have done if she were alive? That question haunted him the most. Meanwhile, Harry was thousands of miles away, blissfully unaware. He was filming a charity video in Montecito, smiling beside Meghan as cameras rolled. They looked perfect as always. A picture of harmony, modernity, and parenthood. But behind the smiles, a storm was already forming that would soon swallow them whole. And while Meghan posed for photographers, the palace's internal inquiry was no longer internal. It had escalated to a national security issue. Because if false documentation had been submitted under royal authority, it wasn't just a family deception, it was potential fraud against the crown. That's when the intelligence agencies got involved. Quietly, discreetly, without press leaks or whispers to courtiers. MI5 began cross-referencing passport records, hospital surveillance logs, and international travel manifests. They followed paper trails across California, Canada, and even to a remote data storage facility in Switzerland. What they found only deepened the nightmare. One senior analyst reported, "It's as though the children appear out of thin air. Every trace of them is digital, photos, videos, documents, but nothing physical, nothing verifiable." Think about that for a second. In an era where every royal baby is documented, christened, and photographed from birth, not one authentic, traceable document existed for Archie or Lilibet. Every image released to the press had digital inconsistencies, metadata that didn't align with the dates, lighting that didn't match their supposed locations, and even image files that originated from marketing agencies rather than personal archives. Still, Charles didn't want to believe it. He wanted to think there was an explanation, some bureaucratic oversight, a misplaced file, a misunderstood legal clause. But as the evidence mounted, even his closest aides began to whisper the unthinkable. One morning, an internal memo crossed the king's desk, marked for His Majesty only. It summarized months of investigation in a single chilling sentence. Evidence indicates the possibility that both minors may be surrogate representations or digital composites. That word, composites, was never supposed to appear in a royal file. Charles froze as he read it again and again. Could it be true? Had Meghan and Harry really deceived not just the world, but the monarchy itself? And if they had, what was their motive? To protect privacy? To preserve an image? Or to maintain a royal inheritance based on an illusion? The king had to know. He authorized a private review with international forensic experts. Every public image of Archie and Lilibet was examined under forensic scrutiny. The results were, in the analyst's words, deeply concerning. Background inconsistencies, facial anomalies, lighting mismatches across frames. Some images appeared to have been generated or composited using multiple sources. In plain English, they weren't authentic. Charles's pulse quickened as he stared at the forensic summary. His thoughts went to the royal line of succession, to tradition, to the oath he took before the Church of England. If the children didn't exist, the legitimacy of the Sussex lineage would collapse entirely. And then there was Harry, his son, the boy who once followed him through palace gardens, clutching his hand after Diana's death. The man who had drifted so far into Hollywood's orbit that his words now sounded more like a press statement than a prince's truth. Would Harry even know? Or had he been deceived too? The king needed answers. So he made a decision that would change everything. He called an emergency council, a meeting that would never appear on the royal calendar. Only 5 people were invited. No notes, no recordings, only truth. But as Charles prepared for that meeting, Meghan's camp had already caught wind of the whispers. In California, a PR alert was sent out to trusted media allies. The palace is preparing a smear campaign. The message read, "Be ready to counter." Except, this time, there was no campaign, no spin, no politics, just a monarch facing the ugliest truth of his reign. By the time the sun rose over London that morning, the royal guard outside Clarence House noticed something unusual. The king's motorcade assembled earlier than usual. Curtains were drawn across every window of the council chamber. No one in the palace corridors dared to speak above a whisper. Inside, the king sat down, looked across the table at his advisors, and began in a low, unsteady voice. "We are not here to discuss perception. We are here to confirm reality." The words hung in the air. Outside, the bells of Westminster rang as if mocking the silence that followed. And in that silence, the monarchy itself began to tremble. Because what Charles was about to read in that confidential dossier would make him question not only the integrity of his family, but the very existence of his grandchildren. What came next would change everything. And no one, neither Harry nor Meghan, nor the world watching from afar, saw it coming. The early morning air around Clarence House carried a weight it hadn't in years. Even the guards at the gate sensed it. They stood a little straighter, their eyes flicking toward the upper windows where, behind thick curtains, something historic was unfolding. It was 6:47 a.m. when King Charles III's private secretary, Sir Alastair Denison, entered the drawing room with a folder stamped in crimson ink. Confidential, royal, eyes only. The king was already seated, wearing a gray wool suit and his reading glasses, though he hadn't yet touched the breakfast tray beside him. The tea had gone cold. There were no cameras, no advisors, no courtiers bustling about to manage the optics. This was not for show. This was the kind of meeting that would never make it into the official palace logs. At precisely 7 a.m., the doors opened, and the 5 people Charles had summoned filed in one by one. Sir Clive Markham, the keeper of the royal archives; Lady Mary Pettigrew, the palace legal director; Colonel Simon Ashcroft, the MI5 liaison, Dr. Margaret Llewellyn, a genealogical scientist attached to the University of Edinburgh; and Archbishop Rowan Gadsby, a long-trusted spiritual advisor to the crown. The air was still heavy. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the marble floor. Charles didn't stand to greet them. He simply looked up, nodded once, and gestured to the documents laid out in front of him. "You've all read the preliminary findings," he said quietly. "Now, we need to confirm whether what I hold in my hands is the truth or the greatest deception in modern royal history." Lady Pettigrew cleared her throat, but said nothing. The room smelled faintly of oak polish and tension. Sir Clive adjusted his spectacles and began, "Your Majesty, as keeper of the royal archives, I can confirm the births of every royal descendant dating back to George II. Each record includes verifiable witnesses, hospital registrations, and christening details. Except," he hesitated, his fingers trembling as he turned the final page, "except for the entries concerning Master Archie Harrison and Miss Lilibet Diana." The king's jaw tightened. "Meaning?" "There are no original documents, sir. No medical certifications. No registrar entries. Nothing within the crown's legal framework that validates their existence as heirs." Charles exhaled sharply. "Then what have we been showing the world?" That question hung there like a blade. Dr. Llewellyn leaned forward, sliding a thin folder across the table. "Your Majesty, if I may, my team was asked to verify the authenticity of photographic and video evidence related to the children. We examined metadata, digital timestamps, and light consistency across known images." Charles nodded for her to continue. She flipped open the folder. Inside were stills of Archie's christening photos, the ones the Sussexes released to the press years earlier. "Note the anomalies," she said, pointing to the printouts. "The lighting patterns suggest compositing. The reflection in the silver baptismal bowl doesn't match the room setup, and the date metadata in the original image file predates the event by nearly 4 months." Lady Pettigrew murmured, "You're saying these images were staged?" "Digitally altered," Dr. Llewellyn corrected softly. "Possibly fabricated using composites of multiple sources. Our analysis suggests manipulation consistent with digital imaging tools. None of the official photos appear to be untouched originals." The king pressed his thumb and forefinger to his temples. "Good Lord." Colonel Ashcroft, who had been silent until now, spoke next. His voice carried the steady confidence of a man used to chaos. "Your Majesty, MI5 Cyber Division followed up on those anomalies. We traced the data servers linked to the original uploads. They were registered to a marketing firm in Los Angeles. not to any royal communications office. Charles looked up sharply. Los Angeles? Yes, sir. A boutique agency that previously managed publicity for the Duchess of Sussex. The files were uploaded from a VPN location outside the United Kingdom, most likely California. The room fell quiet again. The Archbishop shifted uncomfortably. Your Majesty, he began, forgive my intrusion into secular matters, but if this investigation continues down this path, you're not just questioning parentage, you're questioning identity. The monarchy is founded upon lineage. If the bloodline is falsified, Charles cut him off, then the very concept of monarchy collapses. Archbishop, I'm painfully aware. He stood up, pacing slowly to the window. The gray London morning light filtered through the curtains, casting faint shadows across his face. All my life, he said quietly, I've endured scandal, mockery, and betrayal. But I never thought I'd be standing here questioning the existence of my own grandchildren. His voice broke slightly on the last word. Sir Clive spoke gently. Your Majesty, it may yet be an elaborate misunderstanding. There are precedents of record confusion during relocations, international surrogacy complications, and private registrations. Charles turned sharply. And yet we can't find a single midwife, doctor, or witness who can confirm either birth. We can't locate the hospital records. We can't even confirm baptism through the church. No one responded. The king's voice grew colder. I will not preside over a monarchy built on illusion. If deception has occurred, it will be uncovered in full, even if it destroys us. He looked directly at Colonel Ashcroft. I want the next phase authorized immediately. International verification. I want every government record, travel manifest, and financial transaction linked to those children reviewed. Quietly, discreetly, but thoroughly. Ashcroft nodded grimly. It's already underway, sir. Preliminary data from the United States suggests discrepancies in the children's citizenship filings. There are no passport applications under the names Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor or Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor that align with the reported birth dates. Charles frowned. Then how have they been traveling? That's precisely the question, sir. The words hit like thunder. Outside, the faint chime of church bells drifted through the window. Inside, every breath felt heavy. The Archbishop clasped his hands. Your Majesty, if I may offer spiritual counsel, you must prepare yourself for the possibility that this is not a bureaucratic error. It may be willful deceit. Charles closed his eyes. And if it is? Then truth must prevail, no matter the cost. He turned back to the table, his expression now firm. The grief in his eyes had hardened into resolve. Then truth it shall be. Sir Clive cleared his throat again. Your Majesty, there's one more matter. Charles looked at him sharply. Speak. The team uncovered an encrypted financial transfer from a Montecito account labeled under Archwell Foundation. The funds were directed to an anonymous holding company in Argentina, categorized as medical services consulting. The transfer occurred weeks before Archie's supposed birth. The king's brow furrowed. Are you suggesting these were payments related to surrogacy? It's possible, sir. But without disclosure, we cannot determine the recipient or purpose. Charles inhaled deeply. Then find out. I don't care how long it takes or how many lawyers Meghan Markle hires to stop us. The monarchy cannot afford shadows where there should be light. The room sat still again. The only sound was the faint hum of the clock above the fireplace. Finally, Lady Pettigrew spoke. Your Majesty, if this becomes public. It won't, Charles cut in. Not yet. But if it does, she pressed, the constitutional implications would be catastrophic. Questions of succession, public outrage, international relations. I'm aware, he said sharply. Then softer, which is why this stays between us. No one else. Not even William. That last sentence stunned the room. Charles continued. William must not know until we have proof. I will not pit one son against another without certainty. Colonel Ashcroft nodded slowly. Understood, sir. We'll keep operations compartmentalized. Charles turned back toward the window. Outside, the fog was beginning to lift, revealing the gilded gates beyond. I've lived long enough to know that truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, he said. If this is false, it will vindicate us. But if it's true, he stopped mid-sentence, gripping the curtain tightly. If it's true, he whispered, then I may have to do something no father should ever have to do. For a long moment, no one dared speak. Then, quietly, The archbishop said, "Your Majesty, I will pray for guidance." "Do that," Charles murmured. "Pray for the soul of this family, because by the time the truth is revealed, there may be nothing left of it." He turned to his secretary. "Sir Alistair, schedule a follow-up in 72 hours. I want every development reported directly to me. No intermediaries." "Yes, Your Majesty." The group rose slowly, bowing slightly before exiting the room. One by one, the doors closed behind them until only Charles remained. He walked back to the table, picked up the crimson-stamped folder, and stared at it for a long, silent minute. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps in the corridor, the distant clatter of breakfast trays being cleared away, and the muted hum of London traffic beyond the palace gates. The world outside continued as though nothing had changed. But for Charles, everything had. He looked at the portrait of his late mother hanging above the fireplace. Her painted eyes seemed to follow him, calm yet stern, as if demanding that he preserve what she had spent her life protecting. "Forgive me, Mama," he whispered under his breath. "But the truth can't stay buried." He slid the folder back into its envelope and locked it inside the royal safe. Then, without another word, he pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Send word to the Home Office," he said. "We'll need their cooperation for the next stage. And prepare a secure channel to MI6. The operator on the other end hesitated. "Yes, Your Majesty. Shall I also notify the Duke of Sussex?" Charles froze. His hand lingered over the intercom switch. "Not yet," he said finally. "He'll know soon enough." He released the button and sank back into his chair, his face buried in his hands. Outside, the first rays of morning sunlight glinted off the palace windows. Inside, the king sat in silence, knowing that what he had just set in motion could never be undone. And somewhere across the Atlantic, in a mansion in Montecito, Meghan Markle was about to feel the first tremor of a royal earthquake she never saw coming. Because the king wasn't just investigating anymore. He was preparing for judgment. And the verdict, when it came, would shake the entire world. But the next 72 hours would reveal something far worse than forged documents. Something hidden deep within royal archives that would make even Charles question whether his son had ever been told the truth at all. What came next would turn suspicion into certainty and expose a secret so explosive that even the crown couldn't contain it. For years, Meghan Markle had perfected the art of illusion. Every appearance, every photograph, every word she uttered to the world was crafted with surgical precision. To the public, she wasn't just a duchess. She was a symbol. A modern, independent woman who had broken into one of the most traditional institutions on earth and dared to rewrite its rules. But behind the glossy magazine covers, the Netflix documentaries, and the well-timed interviews, something far more deliberate was at play. Meghan's public image as a mother, compassionate, devoted, unbothered by criticism, was her greatest masterpiece. The image of Archie and Lilibet completed the painting. They weren't just her children in the eyes of the world. They were proof that she had truly won. Every shot of her cradling Archie's blanket, every mention of bedtime stories and garden picnics, every carefully curated photo released to the press, all of it built a myth. A royal fairy tale reimagined for Hollywood audiences. But beneath that glimmering surface, cracks had begun to form. It started with something seemingly small, inconsistencies in the children's appearances. When Archie was first introduced to the world, journalists noted how rarely he was seen. Royal babies are usually paraded before cameras. William and Catherine had done it within hours of birth. But Meghan and Harry refused. They said they wanted privacy. Admirable at first. But soon, privacy became opacity. Then came the christening photos, heavily edited, dimly lit, and lacking the traditional press presence. Even palace staff quietly wondered why. One aide later admitted under anonymity, "It felt more like a film set than a christening." Everyone was on edge, and Meghan was controlling every angle, every shot. The king wasn't even told until 2 days before. Still, the world accepted it. Because the narrative was powerful. Meghan wasn't just modernizing motherhood. She was reclaiming it from centuries of royal scrutiny. The media praised her for setting boundaries. Celebrities applauded her courage. But behind palace doors, questions whispered through corridors like drafts of cold air. Why was there no record of the christening in the royal registry? Why were no official witnesses listed? And why did the children's godparents, traditionally public figures, remain unnamed? At first, the palace didn't dare confront her. King Charles, ever the diplomat, hoped it was simply a matter of privacy. But now, with new evidence surfacing, those private doubts began to look like signs everyone ignored. In Montecito, Meghan's home had become a fortress of performance. Staff called it the set. Every corner was designed for aesthetic perfection. White orchids, neutral lighting, subtle backdrops for video calls. The illusion wasn't just visual, it was emotional. She curated empathy the way directors craft drama. When cameras rolled for the Oprah interview, Meghan had already rehearsed every line. She knew the angles, the pauses, the tremble in her voice. And when Oprah gently asked about her children, Meghan's eyes shimmered with carefully controlled tears. "They're everything," she said softly. "They keep me grounded." It was powerful television. It was also the moment the world fully believed in the fairy tale. But months later, eagle-eyed viewers began noticing something strange. Photos from their holiday card didn't match previous public images. Archie's height seemed inconsistent. Lilibet's hairline shifted subtly between appearances. Even the shadows didn't align with California sunlight. Photographic experts who analyzed the images on social media suggested they were digitally composited. Of course, they were dismissed as conspiracy theorists. Still, the whispers grew. Inside Buckingham Palace, King Charles quietly re-watched the Oprah interview in his private study. He froze the frame when Meghan mentioned her daughter's first steps. Something in her tone, something too deliberate, made him uneasy. It sounded rehearsed, not remembered. He leaned forward, replaying the line again. The faintest micro-expression crossed her face before she smiled. It was fleeting, but unmistakable, a flash of discomfort. What was she hiding? Meanwhile, Harry, in his memoir interviews, often contradicted her timeline. In one segment, he mentioned Archie's first Christmas in Windsor, but by then, the Sussexes had already relocated to Canada. Journalists noticed the mismatch, but the media cycle moved on. After all, the Sussex story sold papers, not inconsistencies. But inside the palace, those inconsistencies were adding up like dominoes waiting to fall. Even palace photographers noticed the odd secrecy. One veteran royal cameraman recalled, "Every royal birth and christening I've covered had a sense of history to it. Documentation, protocol, transparency. But with Meghan, it was like photographing smoke. Everything was hidden, staged, and off-limits. She banned most official royal photographers. She controlled her lighting. She vetoed every image before release. The palace press office had no authority. Every photo went through her personal PR team first. To the public, that looked like self-empowerment. To the monarchy, it looked like manipulation. And yet, Meghan's greatest genius wasn't hiding things. It was making people believe they didn't need to ask questions. She wielded empathy like armor. The more she painted herself as the misunderstood victim of an archaic system, the more the world dismissed any suspicion as cruelty. "You can't question a mother's love," one TV host famously said, "especially a mother who's endured so much racism and hatred." And that was exactly how she wanted it. But even as her media empire flourished, cracks in her illusion deepened. Former staff, once silenced by NDAs, began whispering to journalists off the record. One claimed Meghan used dolls during certain filming days, explaining they were stand-ins for the children's privacy. Another recalled odd schedules where the children were never seen eating, crying, or sleeping. Sometimes, the staffer said, it felt like they only existed when cameras were around. It sounded absurd, too bizarre to be real. But in light of what King Charles's investigators had just uncovered, those stories no longer seemed unbelievable. Meanwhile, in Montecito, Meghan doubled down. She expanded her brand. Cookbooks, lifestyle podcasts, children's books, and philanthropic campaigns, all branded around motherhood and family. Her words, her photos, her symbolism, all whispered the same narrative. Meghan, the mother, the nurturer, the victim turned victor. But behind that image, her private world was collapsing. Insiders noticed her growing paranoia. She monitored her staff's devices. She demanded pre-approval of all communications. She forbade even her closest aides from referring to Archie and Lilibet outside of approved talking points. And when one assistant accidentally mentioned the name of a California hospital during a Zoom call, Meghan's tone turned icy. "We don't discuss that," she said. "Ever." Days later, that assistant was gone. By now, King Charles's secret council had begun cross-referencing everything Meghan had ever said publicly about her children. Interviews, speeches, digital records, even book passages. The contradictions were staggering. In one charity video, Meghan said Archie was learning to talk. In another, filmed just 2 months later, she said he was just starting to walk. Even Harry's anecdotes didn't line up. He mentioned bedtime stories featuring Lilibet. But in another appearance, he described her as barely old enough to say mama. Nothing matched. It was as though each narrative was written for a different audience. One for royal watchers, one for American fans, one for Hollywood investors. And each story, subtly but significantly, conflicted with the others. Dr. Llewellyn's team at the University of Edinburgh later noted, "It was almost as if the timelines were manufactured, like different drafts of a script being tested for public response." And that realization terrified the king. Because if the stories were scripted, what else was? Still, Charles didn't act immediately. He wanted proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof, before confronting his son. He had seen enough scandals implode on speculation. So he waited. But fate doesn't wait. 3 weeks after the secret council's meeting, an unnamed royal aide leaked something extraordinary. An internal communication between Meghan's PR team and a private media editing firm in Los Angeles. The message read, "Finalize composite images before 10 a.m. London time. Confirm delivery to Palace Communications under embargo." Composite images. The phrase reappeared again and again. And when investigators compared those emails to the timestamps on the official christening photos, they matched perfectly. That was the moment the king realized this wasn't incompetence. It was orchestration. He reread the report 3 times. The language was unambiguous. Photographic evidence suggests intentional fabrication of visual content presented as authentic documentation. Intentional fabrication. The very phrase made his chest tighten. The monarchy's credibility rested not just on history, but on perception, the illusion of stability, continuity, truth. And now that illusion had been turned against them by someone who understood image manipulation better than anyone. Across the Atlantic, Meghan was in her element. Her new podcast had just launched. Netflix had renewed her production deal. Hollywood circles whispered about her powerful reinvention. Yet inside her house, the mood was strained. Harry's temper flared more often. He felt the distance growing between his father's silence and Meghan's relentless control. "Why haven't they invited us back for any royal event?" he asked one evening. "They're punishing us," Meghan said, eyes fixed on her laptop. "But we'll control the narrative. Always have, always will." But deep down, she felt it. The shifting air, the subtle change in tone from once friendly journalists, the growing skepticism online. And then came the rumor that would shatter everything, that the king's investigators had found something buried deep in official archives. At first, Meghan dismissed it as another conspiracy. But the look in Harry's eyes that night told her this time was different. "What if they're digging for something?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She just looked away. Because Meghan knew there were records missing, one she had personally instructed her lawyers to seal. Now, they were being unsealed. And what those documents revealed would make even the king's private counsel go pale. Because the next file to surface wasn't a birth record. It was the absence of one. And that absence, that single missing certificate, would open the gates to a truth so dark, so devastating, that not even Meghan's illusions could hide it. What came next would not only destroy the myth of the perfect royal mother, it would tear apart the very timeline of Archie and Lilibet's existence. The illusion was beginning to crumble. And what waited beneath was far, far worse. The moment the palace archivists began searching the National Registry, they knew something was wrong. It wasn't just missing paperwork. It was as though the very concept of the births themselves had been erased. No registration numbers, no attending physicians, no filing officers. It was a clean void. A digital ghost where royal history should have been etched forever. Royal births are sacred in the United Kingdom. Each one recorded in embossed parchment, sealed with crimson wax, logged into both the Royal Register and the General Records Office. It's tradition, but more than that, it's legal proof of succession. A system so airtight it has survived wars, abdications, and fires. Yet when investigators logged into the secure Crown database to locate the files for Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor and Lilibet Diana, the screen didn't load. The system returned a blunt, sterile message: no record found. At first, the clerk thought it was an error. Servers sometimes timed out, especially with older data imports. But when she tried again, using alternate queries, the result didn't change. She checked the manual ledgers, the printed archives kept in temperature-controlled vaults beneath Westminster. Still nothing. It was as if the births never existed. That discovery sent shockwaves through the palace corridors. No one dared to speak openly, but the whispers spread like wildfire. The files are missing. The names don't exist in the system. Someone's tampered with the register. By the time word reached Clarence's house, the king was already awake, pacing. His breakfast sat untouched as he waited for the official report. When Sir Clive Markham entered, his face was gray, his tone clipped. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "I regret to inform you. The birth certificates of your grandchildren cannot be located in any national or royal archive." Charles turned slowly, as if the words themselves were physically heavy. "Cannot be located? Or never existed?" Sir Clive hesitated. "We don't yet know, but there are anomalies." He placed a small folder on the king's desk. Inside were photocopies of online records allegedly tied to Archie and Lilibet, screenshots of public announcements, registry scans, social media confirmations. But the metadata on each file told a darker story. Dates didn't match. File histories showed multiple alterations. And the official birth certificate of Archie, once thought genuine, was a template, the same form used in public access birth registration software, complete with formatting errors no government document would ever contain. Charles sat down heavily, the weight of centuries pressing on his chest. "Show me," he said quietly. Sir Clive flipped through the documents. "This," he explained, "was the certificate that circulated publicly. It lists the hospital as Portland in London, yet the hospital's administrative records show no royal security presence that day. Furthermore, the listed registrar, Mrs. Alison Cathcart, retired 6 months prior." The king's eyes darkened. "And Lilibet?" "Worse, I'm afraid," Sir Clive said. "The certificate used a California registration number tied to a pet adoption file from Santa Barbara County." Charles froze. "A what?" "A pet file, sir. It appears the number sequence corresponds to a veterinary registry system, not a human birth index." For several seconds, there was nothing but silence. The air inside the room grew colder. Finally, Charles whispered, "This isn't error. This is forgery." Down the hall, palace staff whispered among themselves. A clerk from the Office of Royal Documentation had been quietly reassigned after allegedly leaking the information to an outside legal contact. Her belongings were cleared out within an hour. Every file she'd accessed was now locked under royal order. The king convened another private meeting that evening, smaller this time, quieter. Just himself, Lady Pettigrew, and Colonel Ashcroft. The colonel arrived with a new file, stamped Level 6, restricted access. "Your Majesty," he began, "we've traced back the chain of custody for both documents. The submission logs suggest they were filed through third-party intermediaries rather than through direct hospital verification." Charles frowned. "Intermediaries? Meaning, Ashcroft continued. "Someone inserted falsified digital entries into the registry using remote access credentials that no longer exist. Those accounts were deleted 72 hours after the uploads." Charles clenched his jaw. And who would have those credentials? Only individuals with high-level clearance within either the Royal Communications Office or the Ministry of Health. In other words, insiders. Charles leaned back in his chair, his voice low and deliberate. So this deception, this falsification, wasn't done by tabloids or trolls. It was done by people with authority. Ashcroft nodded. Possibly acting under influence. Possibly paid. The king's expression turned stony. "Then find out who paid them." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Rain lashed against the windows, streaking the glass like tears. Inside, the room flickered with candlelight, a stark contrast between the ancient and the digital, the royal and the criminal. Lady Pettigrew spoke next, her tone cautious. "Your Majesty, if I may, we have reason to believe these falsified documents were uploaded from a foreign server. The IP traces back to Toronto, Canada, the same network once linked to a law firm representing She hesitated. Charles's voice was sharp. Representing whom? She swallowed. The Duchess of Sussex. The words landed like an execution bell. The king stood up abruptly. His chair scraped against the marble floor. Are you telling me my daughter-in-law orchestrated the falsification of royal birth records? We can't yet confirm that, sir, Lady Pettigrew replied. But the digital signature on the encryption key used to access the registry bears a near match to her former communications director's device ID. Charles turned away, staring at the rain-smeared window. His reflection looked older than he remembered. God help us, he muttered. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Meghan was smiling for cameras at a charity gala. She looked radiant, glowing skin, effortless confidence, the perfect image of composure. Reporters asked about her children, and she responded with warm, practiced charm. They're wonderful, she said. Curious, bright, full of laughter. They've got Harry's sense of humor. But that same evening, an anonymous email landed in a reporter's inbox at The Guardian. No name, no subject line, just a single attachment labeled, Royal Birth Record Audit, Internal Findings. Within minutes, the newsroom was buzzing. Editors recognized what they were looking at, internal Crown documents that shouldn't have left the palace walls. But before the story could be verified, the email vanished. The attachment corrupted itself, leaving behind a single line of code. Access revoked. The sender had erased their trail perfectly. The next morning, the king received a call from the Home Secretary. Your Majesty, there's chatter. Someone tried to leak classified material last night. Charles's voice was quiet. Then we have a mole. By now, the investigation had turned into a labyrinth, one where every door led to another locked room. Every answer opened 2 more questions. Who forged the documents? Who funded the operation? And most crucially, why? Was it a desperate act of privacy, or something far darker? A calculated effort to manufacture heirs and secure inheritance rights tied to royal estates? Because, as one palace advisor bluntly put it, if the children don't exist, every legal claim they've made on royal assets is fraudulent. Charles barely slept. He moved through the palace like a ghost, his expression unreadable. Camilla tried to reach him one evening over dinner. You're torturing yourself, she said softly. Maybe you should wait before confronting them. But Charles shook his head. The truth doesn't wait. And if I delay, the institution falls before I do. By the end of that week, Colonel Ashcroft's team uncovered the final, irrefutable piece of evidence. A timestamp. Every digital birth record in the United Kingdom is logged with a system-generated timestamp from the moment it's filed. That timestamp can't be erased, not without rewriting the code of the National Registry itself. And yet, when Ashcroft's team examined the timestamps for Archie and Lilibet's supposed registrations, they found something that froze them. Both entries were created at the exact same second. Not minute. Second, June 9th, 2020, 2:46 and 7 seconds Universal Time Coordinated. Impossible. No 2 human data entries, even automated, can occur at the same millisecond unless they're batch uploaded, said Ashcroft. Which means both documents were created simultaneously, from a single command file. Charles read the report silently. His face went pale. You're saying someone fabricated both births in one operation? Yes, sir, Ashcroft replied. And the signature line on the code matches a software used by a California media firm, a firm subcontracted by Netflix during production of Harry and Meghan. Charles lowered the paper. His voice trembled, though his words were steady. Then it's not just fraud, he said softly. It's cinematic. The investigation now crossed into international jurisdiction. The Home Office classified the matter under Royal Integrity Protocol. MI6 was quietly briefed. As the king signed the order to escalate the inquiry, his pen slipped slightly, smearing ink across the paper. A small, almost symbolic gesture, a royal signature, blurred under the weight of scandal. He looked up at his advisors. We follow this wherever it leads, he said, no matter the cost. And with that, the invisible gears of state began to turn, fast, silent, and unstoppable. But while the king was preparing to expose the truth across the Atlantic, Meghan received a discreet message from an anonymous number. They found the missing records. Her face went white. Her phone slipped slightly in her hand, because she knew exactly what that meant. It meant the story she had built, the illusion she had perfected, was about to collide head-on with the most powerful institution in Britain. And this time, there would be no interview, no tears, no sympathetic headlines to save her. What the investigators were about to uncover next would make the missing birth certificates look like the least of her worries. Because the trail didn't end in London or California. It led somewhere far more unexpected, a place no one in the royal family ever thought to look. A place that would pull the investigation out of Britain entirely and into a labyrinth of private contracts, sealed accounts, and international law. The royal investigation was going global, and the next name on the report would ignite the biggest firestorm in modern monarchy. By the time dawn broke over London the following week, the palace no longer resembled a royal residence. It felt like a command center. Confidential reports were arriving from embassies, encrypted files transferring through secure MI6 channels, and the king's private office was buzzing with the low, controlled panic of a global operation. The monarch who once spent mornings sipping Earl Grey and reviewing garden designs was now reading intelligence summaries stamped classified, foreign interest. The deception had outgrown Britain. It was now an international scandal in the making. Colonel Simon Ashcroft sat across from King Charles in the private library at Clarence House, a folder thick with satellite data, travel manifests, and financial transfers. He began without preamble. Your Majesty, we've confirmed that the falsified birth registrations were executed through offshore proxies. The trail begins in California, passes through a shell firm in Toronto, and ends, unbelievably, in Doha, Qatar. Charles looked up sharply. Qatar. Yes, sir. A financial intermediary linked to a sovereign investment group that, until recently, had business ties to several Hollywood media firms, including Archwell Productions. Charles's jaw tightened. You're suggesting foreign funding was involved? Ashcroft nodded grimly. Possibly to bankroll the cover-up or facilitate the surrogacy arrangements. We can't be certain yet, but the movement of funds suggests coordination far beyond a family matter. Lady Pettigrew, seated nearby, interjected softly. That would mean Meghan and Harry's so-called private arrangements were, in fact, part of a multi-country operation. That's not privacy, that's strategy. The king rubbed his temple slowly. A royal deception with international financing. God help us all. Meanwhile, MI6 analysts traced data streams across continents. Emails, contracts, anonymous transfers. All painted the same picture. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to construct an illusion of legitimacy around two non-existent heirs. And as investigators delved deeper, one question began to dominate every report. Who was orchestrating it? Because as damaging as Meghan's manipulation appeared, the evidence hinted at coordination well beyond her capabilities. Encrypted communications between her PR representatives and two foreign law firms revealed something startling. A third party had been mediating. A consultant, described in one document as the handler. The term unsettled everyone. A handler implied control, direction, secrecy, and purpose. Not coincidence. At Buckingham Palace, King Charles convened a meeting with intelligence officials from both the United Kingdom and Canada. The conversation, conducted over secure lines, was tense. British operatives confirmed data irregularities linking Meghan's Canadian legal representation to companies registered under pseudonyms. Canadian intelligence, in turn, disclosed that these same entities had been under quiet observation for potential document laundering, the digital kind, where real identities are cloaked under fabricated records. It's a coordinated digital forgery ring, one MI6 analyst explained. They specialize in creating legal documents indistinguishable from genuine ones, often for high-profile clients seeking discretion. Charles's eyes narrowed. High-profile clients like a duke and duchess? The line went silent. Across the Atlantic, Harry remained publicly oblivious. He was photographed jogging near their Montecito mansion, earbuds in, smiling faintly as paparazzi shouted questions. How's Archie doing, Harry? When will we see Lilibet again? He didn't answer. He just jogged faster. But behind closed doors, Meghan wasn't calm. Her phone had been ringing constantly, journalists asking questions they weren't supposed to ask yet. A royal aide had leaked word that King Charles had personally involved MI6. That revelation changed everything. She knew the king wasn't bluffing. If he'd pulled in intelligence services, he wasn't searching anymore. He was building a case. And Meghan understood something that few others did. Once the crown gathered evidence, it wouldn't matter what the public believed. The monarchy could erase someone quietly, surgically, without a single press release. All it took was one phrase, in accordance with the interests of the realm. That night, Meghan called her crisis manager. "We need to shut this down," she said. "Everything, communications, bank trails, photos, all of it. Lock it up." Her manager hesitated. "You can't hide digital forensics, Meghan. Once MI6 is in, it's over." Meghan's voice turned cold. "Then we rewrite the narrative before they do." Across the ocean, the king wasn't waiting for narratives. He was demanding evidence. The next morning, Colonel Ashcroft briefed him on a shocking discovery. "Your Majesty, our contacts in Switzerland located a digital archive registered to a data escrow company. The account is linked to the Duchess's personal trust fund. Inside are high-resolution photo files, timestamped before the supposed birth dates of both children." Charles frowned. "So these images existed before the births?" "Yes, sir. Which means they were pre-constructed, either staged or digitally assembled," Lady Pettigrew added. "And one of the file folders bears the name Project Crownlight." The king froze. "Crownlight?" "Yes," Pettigrew said. "We believe it's a code name used in internal communications between Meghan's team and their digital imaging contractors, possibly referring to the photos meant to illuminate their family to the world." Charles stared out the window for a long moment. "Illuminate, indeed," he said quietly. "More like blind." Meanwhile, word of the royal investigation had begun leaking across diplomatic circles. Foreign ministries were quietly briefed to prepare for potential reputational fallout. A single misstep could embarrass not only the monarchy, but also allied governments who had publicly recognized the Sussex children as royal heirs. At the British Embassy in Washington, the ambassador received a sealed directive from London. All communication regarding the Duke and Duchess to be filtered through crisis protocol until further notice. The subtext was clear. The situation was now classified. Inside the palace, tension thickened. Charles's relationship with Harry had disintegrated into silence. Every attempt at communication went through aides. The king feared that confronting his son directly might trigger a media explosion. But Harry was already hearing rumors, from staff, from American journalists, and perhaps even from Meghan herself. And when he did, his anger would ignite like fuel on fire. Across Europe, the investigation reached new territory. In Spain, a financial intelligence unit traced a series of payments from Archwell to a media firm known for image composites and privacy consulting. The invoices referenced child imagery projects. When questioned, the firm claimed it was digital privacy management, a vague phrase that meant nothing and everything. But it was a discovery in Canada that broke the case wide open. An independent journalist uncovered records of a surrogate agency operating out of Toronto under a different name. The agency's files were sealed, but a whistleblower revealed that one of its clients, in 2018, had used pseudonyms matching Meghan's middle name and date of birth. The payment, nearly £500,000, was processed through an offshore account. The whistleblower described the file as an anonymous celebrity surrogacy case, handled with top-level discretion. No child's name was ever registered. No birth was declared. And the agency shut down the following year. When the intelligence report landed on King Charles's desk, his pulse quickened. He turned the page slowly, absorbing the words. Anonymous client. Payment confirmed. No registered child. He whispered, almost to himself. Then who did the world see? The silence in the room was unbearable. Every person present understood the gravity of that question. If the children's births were unregistered, if the photos were fabricated, if the documents were forged, then the entire narrative of royal succession through Harry's line was fiction. Colonel Ashcroft broke the silence. "Your Majesty, we have to consider contingency planning." Charles blinked. "Contingency?" "Yes, sir. If the public learns the truth, there will be calls for constitutional review. We must prepare for an official statement or, if you prefer, a quiet retraction of titles under royal integrity provisions." The king leaned forward, his voice cold and steady. "No statements. Not yet. We proceed in silence. The moment we speak, we legitimize the chaos." Ashcroft nodded. "Then we continue discreetly." But the world was already stirring. Leaked whispers had reached American tabloids. A headline appeared on a fringe site that evening. Where are the royal babies? Palace launches quiet inquiry. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Social media lit up. Hashtags trended globally. Hashtag where is Archie? Hashtag Lilibet truth. Hashtag royal DNA. The palace issued no response. Silence only fueled the flames. Inside Montecito, Meghan's composure finally cracked. She stormed through her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "This is defamation," she barked at her lawyer. "They can't do this to me." But the lawyer's voice was measured. "They can if they have proof." "What proof?" she demanded. "There is no proof." The lawyer paused. "Then why are you so nervous, Meghan?" She hung up without answering. Meanwhile, across London, a royal courier delivered an envelope to King Charles marked confidential, foreign security memo. The attached report came from British intelligence partners in Geneva. Its contents were brief but devastating. Subject: DNA discrepancy, unsanctioned sample test results. The memo stated that genetic samples taken from archival royal artifacts, heirloom brushes, blood trace garments, had been compared against material allegedly belonging to the Sussex children. The comparison showed no correlation. Not partial. None. The report ended with one line: further testing required to confirm non-relation beyond reasonable doubt. Charles sat in stunned silence. The world outside continued. The hum of cars, the chatter of aides. But to him, everything had gone still. His family, his legacy, his monarchy, built on lineage, now balanced on the edge of a single genetic revelation. He closed the folder slowly, his expression unreadable. "So it's true," he whispered. The illusion was complete. But before the palace could verify or contain the results, someone leaked the existence of the DNA file to the press. Within 24 hours, British and American networks were running with a single question: why is the king ordering DNA tests on his grandchildren? The story had gone global, and the monarchy's silence was deafening. Yet what the public didn't know was that the DNA report they were hearing about wasn't even the full story. There was a second test, one conducted quietly, without authorization, using a sealed genetic database connected to the royal bloodline. That test results hadn't been leaked. They hadn't been leaked yet, because the next revelation wouldn't come from the palace or the press. It would come from within Meghan's own camp. And when it did, it wouldn't just confirm the king's worst fears. It would expose how deep the deception went. Because what MI6 found next wasn't merely genetic inconsistency. It was absence, the absence of biological origin altogether. Something was missing from the DNA data itself. Something impossible. And when the analysts presented that to the king, he realized this was no longer about fraud or surrogacy. It was about existence. What came next would turn the investigation from a scandal into a royal apocalypse that IT started with a single line in an encrypted email that made even the most seasoned MI6 analysts pause. Sample results inconclusive. No biological match detected. King Charles stared at the screen, his eyes narrowing. He read the line again. No, that couldn't be right. He leaned back in his chair, the polished mahogany pressing into his shoulders, and whispered to no one in particular. Impossible. It can't be true. Yet the words persisted. The DNA tests had been authorized discreetly, conducted on artifacts linked to Archie, Harrison, and Lilibet Diana. Small strands of hair, traces of blood from sealed clothing, even fibers from blankets stored for decades in private collections. Every legitimate channel had been followed, every safeguard observed. And yet, the lab results returned an outcome no one could have anticipated. The children simply did not share the genetic markers expected of Harry and Meghan's alleged offspring. Colonel Simon Ashcroft, the MI5 liaison coordinating the investigation, entered the room cautiously. "Your Majesty," he began, "we need to discuss the implications. The results are preliminary, but the anomaly is consistent across multiple laboratories." Charles's voice was cold, deliberate. "Consistent?" "Yes, sir. Across 3 separate facilities, including an independent genetic laboratory in Switzerland. The markers simply do not align with either parent." The king sank into his chair. His mind raced, cycling through decades of tradition, of lineage, of a monarchy built on bloodlines. Could it be true? Could the children of his son, his beloved Harry, have never existed as biological heirs? The room was silent. Even the soft ticking of the clock above the fireplace seemed to pause. Lady Mary Pettigrew, the palace legal director, cleared her throat. Your Majesty, the legal ramifications are profound. If the children are not biologically related, their entitlement to royal titles and inheritance under the laws of succession could be invalid. Charles rubbed his eyes. Invalid. Entirely. Yes, sir. And the implications extend beyond titles. Every public record, every official acknowledgement, every statement by the palace referencing their status is potentially compromised. The king's mind flashed back to public appearances, Christmas portraits, christenings, and interviews. The images, carefully crafted and circulated, had presented the children as real. But now, those appearances were mere shadows of truth. Fabricated, staged, or worse, imagined. Colonel Ashcroft continued cautiously. Your Majesty, there is more. The samples suggest that the children may not have existed physically at all. While we cannot yet confirm this conclusively, the genetic absence is alarming. Charles's chest tightened. He felt a cold surge of betrayal. Not just from his son, not just from Meghan, but from the entire illusion. Every lie, every carefully staged photograph, every statement to the press had been built upon a foundation that may not exist. He rose and began pacing. Absence, he muttered under his breath. Not a mismatch, absence.